I felt like the rubber metal body just went down.
Caught on police body cam after an officer was exposed to a deadly drug during an arrest. His fellow officers sprang into action to administer Narcan, a nasal spray.
Okay, gotta put on the glasses. This way, I see more of I'm more of an intellectual with the glasses on. Welcome to another episode of Drug Mythbusters, where we look at some of the most pervasive myths about drugs, dig it apart to see what's actually going on with some of these myths that you hear. Today, I want to take you through a very strange video out of Columbus, Ohio. So for background, this is a video of a woman who has been pulled over for drug possession. She's being arrested. During the process of her arrest, an officer becomes exposed to the drug that she is suspected of owning. And this video is body cam footage that starts right after the officer says that he was exposed.
I'm sorry to 24. 151, send us a 24, possible overdose. You okay? You alright? Ask her what it is. 151, this is for an officer, roll a 24. What is that? What is that you have?
Where? I have nothing.
No. In the car, what is that?
She called it icer. I swear to God, that's what she called it.
Fentanyl in it?
Not that I know of.
Okay, well, we have an officer having an effect right now. There's no fentanyl not in it?
Please don't tell me nothing like that.
He called...
Please.
Stop. It's called icer?
That's what she called it. I swear that's what she called it. Icer.
What is it? What's the then that's the generic name. What is it? Meth?
It's supposed to be meth. She said meth and ice.
Meth and ice.
152, do we have a medic on the way?
No.
Little side note here, you'll notice that her face is shown, but the officer's face is blurred out, which seems backwards to me, but whatever, we'll move on.
I'm getting my... You got yours out? All right, relax. Hey, take this. Take it. All right, load it up.
Hey, help me with it.
Hold on.
They start preparing the Narcan to help the officer in the white shirt who has been exposed to this substance. And you can see them as they're preparing the Narcan. They are literally shaking with fear. This is where things begin to get weird. The cops administer the Narcan to the officer who was exposed, and the reaction, I just have to show it to you. It really can't be described.
151, Narcan administered.
Copy.
Get him. Give me another gun. Or glove. Give me another glove. You all right?
Yeah.
Take some deep breaths, buddy. Watch rolling on your head.
You can clear the female first because I'm heading up there.
Copy, you want to wait here first?
Keep his head on the side in case he's going to throw up.
So the cop begins spitting and rolling around on the ground and wheezing and groaning, and it just seems like he's been punched in the rib cage. It's a strange reaction to see to any drug, but it's even stranger when you listen to him describe his symptoms.
Really bad headache.
Here, I'm going to move my car so the medics can get...
What else besides a headache? Oh, I felt like the rubber metal body just went down.
Let me make something abundantly clear here. This cop was definitely not exposed to fentanyl. We know that because fentanyl is an opioid. Opioids are sedatives and cough suppressants, so really the last thing that you would expect them to cause is rolling around on the ground actively talking and coughing, lots of coughing and wheezing. Not something that would be a typical reaction from fentanyl, especially if you're overdosing on it. Of course, we also know that the cop never got exposed to fentanyl because the lab tests showed that there was no fentanyl in the substance that this woman possessed. It was just methamphetamine, nothing special about it, no fentanyl present. So after seeing this video, I was curious. So I decided to do some research and see if I could figure out exactly how this cop was supposedly exposed to the substance, or what, how did it enter his body, what could have happened. But in the video, there's not a lot of clues to go on. The video begins after the exposure, and they probably should have their body cams on the full time, but cops will be cops. We really don't have a lot of information to go on. What we do have is a brief second where the cop says that he wasn't wearing his gloves. So we know that his skin was a potential route of administration. There's an article from the BBC, however, which says that he inhaled the substance, which contradicts everything else. I think they got their facts wrong there. I think the best evidence we have is a Columbus Dispatch article that describes how this woman ended up getting arrested. She was in the parking lot of a gas station or a convenience store, and she was about to snort a line of this substance off of her phone, and the police rolled up on her and basically caught her red-handed about to do the drugs. But the only thing that this cop in the white shirt did was take the phone and move it onto the dashboard of his police cruiser. And that is when he began experiencing symptoms. So from the video, you can tell that these cops genuinely believe that their coworker has been exposed to some sort of drug. They're panicking, they're wearing gloves, they talk about, are you sure you're wearing gloves when you're handling him? You don't want to get anything on you, were you touching the stuff? So they clearly think there's a real danger here and that this guy has really been exposed to something. And maybe he was exposed. It's really impossible to say, given how little information came out after the video was released. But I think we should look into it and see what exactly could have happened. As far as I can tell, there are really only two possible routes of exposure to this substance. Either it got on his skin and absorbed that way, or he inhaled some. Inhalation, I think we can eliminate as a possibility right away, because he would have had to have knocked the drug, like slammed it on the dashboard or something and caused a big poof of the powder to go into the air, and then he would have had to have had a really big deep breath to catch it right as it was poofing out toward him. Methamphetamine is a potent drug, but it's unlikely that he would have been able to inhale enough to feel any kind of effect. Skin absorption is a possibility though, because methamphetamine can be absorbed dermally. However, there are problems with that theory too. Two studies from Charles Salix of the California EPA studied how easily the skin can absorb methamphetamine. And those studies found that even under ideal conditions, when the meth is dissolved in water, when the skin is especially acidic, it takes at least 5 minutes for the drug to absorb, and sometimes it takes several hours or more. Okay, let's set up a scenario where we're being really charitable. Let's say that this cop has really acidic skin. Maybe while he's moving the phone to the dashboard, he knocks some meth onto his skin, and despite the fact that it's cold enough that everyone in the video is wearing a jacket, for some reason he's sweating profusely, all the meth dissolves, and then it's in a liquid solution so it can absorb more easily into his skin. Could he have been exposed under those conditions? No, probably not. Unless the cop spilled the entire line of meth onto his skin and didn't bother to wipe it off or do anything, he just let it sit there and just soak in. I seriously doubt that he would have gotten an active dose of meth into his system. I don't think that it's likely that all of these conditions would line up perfectly for the absorption to work, that there would be enough spilled on his skin that he wouldn't notice, that he wouldn't wipe it off, that it just doesn't really add up. I guess then the question is this cop faking it? Is he just being dramatic? And I don't think that's the case either. I think that he saw white powder, he was aware of the danger of fentanyl, and he had a placebo freak out. He genuinely thought that he'd been exposed to something, and the reaction that followed was just the placebo effect. Police are constantly warned about the dangers of fentanyl exposure, so it's very possible that this was fresh in this guy's mind when he got exposed. Police sometimes even wear hazmat suits and respirators and big, thick gloves when they're handling what they suspect to be fentanyl. This is a very real fear for them. In fact, fentanyl paranoia is so rampant among police officers that 90% of them said it was a big fear for them in a Police One survey. And, on first glance, that fear may seem pretty rational. After all, fentanyl is 100 times more potent than morphine, and a dose as low as a milligram or 2 can kill you. Now, that may seem like, 1 or 2 milligrams, that could easily end up in your system by accident. But that's just not the case. It's actually pretty hard to be exposed to that much fentanyl unless you're intentionally taking the substance. Unless someone is blowing the powder directly in your face, it's pretty much impossible to inhale a lethal dose of fentanyl. Skin exposure to fentanyl is possible, but it does take hours and hours to absorb. It absorbs even more slowly than meth does. This low risk of accidental fentanyl exposure is something that scientists have confirmed over and over. The American Academy of Clinical Toxicology and some other organizations released a position letter to calm the nerves of first responders, where they said, quote, "The risk of clinically significant exposure to emergency responders is extremely low. To date, we have not seen reports of emergency responders developing signs or symptoms consistent with opioid toxicity from incidental contact with opioids." However, this myth is extremely persistent. It's so deeply ingrained into the minds of police that people have been arrested for exposing officers to drugs. A man named Martin Higginbotham was arrested in Ohio after he was revived by Narcan after an opioid overdose and kicked a bag of powder toward police. And now it's not clear whether he did that intentionally or he did it because he was panicking and just almost died, but he was arrested anyway and charged with assault on police. In East Liverpool, also in Ohio, a man was given 6 years for assault on police because a cop got a drug powder on his shirt. These are just 2 examples of an ongoing trend. Also, what's wrong with Ohio? These are just 2 examples of an ongoing trend. As police become more fearful of drugs and they think drugs are more dangerous, they think that drug users are more dangerous. They become more afraid of drug users. Police are already afraid that drug users might be violent, and now they have this additional risk bouncing around in their noggins, thinking that drug users are inherently dangerous even if they're completely nonviolent. Due to videos like this, drug users are seen as walking clouds of poison. And if you want proof of that fact, just watch the video. Look at the cop's reaction when he thinks that he's been exposed. He hasn't even he probably had no drugs in his system at all, but his belief that he had those drugs in his system was strong enough that he thought he might die, and he was on the ground coughing. They could barely prop him up when they were trying to get him into the ambulance. He was having trouble standing. So strong was his placebo reaction to this non-existent exposure. And, it's not just cops who think this way. Look at the comments on the video. Poor guy. That must have hit him like a freight train. He probably has been drug-free his entire life, and he gets exposed to fentanyl? Yeah, Hess not feeling so hot ATM. Poor guy. And yes, I'm sure it would have hit him like a freight train had it actually been fentanyl. But it wasn't. It's meth and ice? Jesus, take the wheel. Whatever he got into, it wasn't meth. Except it was. It was. The lab results were released afterward by the police department saying that it was just meth, no fentanyl. And I especially hate the next comment that I'm going to read. Now imagine an innocent kid finding some on the floor. Look what it did to a grown-ass man. Except the thing was, the grown-ass man was just having a placebo reaction. He was totally fine. At the hospital, he was released in a couple of hours. But more importantly, there were no kids in this video. No kids were exposed to this substance as far as we know. And if this woman does have kids, personally, I'm a lot more worried about how those kids will fare without a mother now that she's in prison, as opposed to the pretty low chance that they might accidentally touch drugs. Statistically speaking, they're in a lot more danger from the situation that actually played out instead of the imaginary situation that this video is creating in people's heads. So this myth of fentanyl exposure everywhere, constant danger from fentanyl exposure, it exaggerates the danger that police and the public face when dealing with drug users. It justifies the war on drugs because you can point and say, look, they're not just making a bad decision that affects themselves, they're putting the whole society at risk. They're an environmental toxin. Because of videos like this, because of the stigma that they spread, people think they're personally at risk from other people's drug use. They think that their kids are at risk of exposure. And if you can convince people that their kids are in danger, you can convince them to do anything that would keep their kids safe. You can convince them to vote for politicians that commit drug crackdowns and mass arrests and fund the drug war and all this stuff. It may not be intended as it, but this video is propaganda. I hope this video was educational, and I hope it cleared up some of these misconceptions about how dangerous fentanyl is. I'm a very busy guy, but I do love making these videos, and I hope that you like them too. And if you do, there is a button on youtube.com that you can use to indicate that fact. So smash it. Smash the like button. Okay, cringe. I've already got a lot more ideas for future videos in store, but in the meantime, as always, test your drugs, be safe, and take care.